welcome to Mr. Schreiber's first video on economics. In this video, we'll be talking about some misconceptions in regards to economics, as well as some key basic um, concepts and vocabulary. So, the first real question is why do we study this course, and what is it really all about? And if you ask the average person on the street um, what economics is, their answer is always going to involve money. That somehow dinero, Benjamins, these green pieces of paper is really what economics is all about. It's about how to make it, how to invest it, etc. And the reality is that while money is part of economics, it is not the key cornerstone or kind of core of economics. It has a part in economics, but it goes much further. Economics goes much further than just talking about money. Um, so while we will just address money in many different ways, including personal finance, um, as the course, money makes a very small portion of it. So that's just to clarify that misconception. Okay. So if it's not about money per se, then what is it about? As you see, the answer is in the following statement. Economics is really looking at the issue of what we call scarcity and how different groups deal with this issue. And this is something that you as an individual deals with. Every company that you can think of and know about deals with it, and every society deals with this issue. So the key point here is that it affects everyone, um, and everyone has to address it whether they realize it or not. So I think the first important thing here is to define what is scarcity. So scarcity is describes this issue that there are not enough what we call goods or items that we produce, and there are not enough services, that being things that you pay other people to do, to meet the desires, okay, of everyone. And again, what we're saying is there's not enough things, okay, for that everyone would like. So what that means is we have two competing realities. On the one hand, we have an unlimited want. We want, cars and clothes and pools and movie theaters. And yet we only have a limited amount of resources that we can really use to make all those goods and services that we all desire so deeply. So the question is what do we do about it? Well, let's clarify this concept a little bit more. Unlimited wants. Okay. Unlimited wants is the idea that we have a desire, and the desire means that we have. It's just basically things that we want, and we have this desire for things in our lives, either to make our lives easier, to make them better, or just to survive. And you can see, for many of us in the morning, coffee is something that we really like to have. Some of us would even argue we need to have it. But again, it's something that we desire. And it's a physical product that many of us purchase, and sometimes spending quite a bit of money on. It can also include services, like, as it says up there, fixing your car when your car breaks down or needs an oil change. Most of us don't do that ourselves anymore. We hire someone to do that. And we pay money for that. So there you go. Those are two examples that most of us can easily relate to. And just to clarify, a need is just a really strong want. Obviously, you need food, water, and shelter to survive. And if you don't have one of those things, you will do everything you can to acquire them. But really, we're not going to make much of a difference between need and want. We're basically going to assume they're one and the same, where needs are just a bit more, you put a little more emphasis on a need. On the other side of that is what we call a limited resource. Okay? And we describe those as just being the raw materials, okay, that we use to make all the things, the items, or to provide the services that people want. Okay? Obviously, we realize that most of the things that we use every day are not found in nature. They are produced. They have been created for us by someone else. Whatever resources are specifically used to make those goods and services are the raw materials, or the limited resources in this case. An easy example would be the cell phone that's in your pocket or that you're using right now to watch this video. Um, it was obviously not found in nature. It is created from petroleum or oil. And all plastic comes from oil, and so that is the raw material or the limited resource that we use to produce the cell phone. And again, everything in your world, for the most part, um, has been kind of created from some other raw material, and therefore, that's what we mean by limited resource. So what we come to is that we have unlimited wants on the one hand versus limited resources on the other hand. Okay, and you can see in this description here, economics is how we deal with this struggle or this dilemma, as we often refer to. That on the one hand, we have an unlimited desire for goods and services. We would like more and more and more of just about everything. But on the other hand, there's only a limited amount of resources that we can use to produce more and more and more goods and services. And there are not enough resources, there's not enough time or money or actual resources, whether it be oil in the ground or trees in the world, to produce everything that we would want as a society. Okay. So, where does that lead us? That leads us that because of this, what I describe as this dilemma on limited wants versus limited resources, you as an individual have to make choices. Okay. How are you going to use these limited resources? In what manner? In what we're going to produce, and what are we going to choose not to produce? Okay. And to clarify this, okay, for most people, including yourself, two of the biggest limited resources that you have to address on almost a daily basis is how will you spend your time, okay, because you only have 24 hours a day, and obviously how will you spend your money. With most of us, I assume, don't have unlimited funds, we do not have a money tree in the backyard, and so therefore you have to choose how to spend that limited amount of cash in your pocket. Okay. And to give you an example here, here are two options. If you have $20 in your pocket, you can go out to lunch, you and a friend maybe, and get a relatively decent meal. Or you can probably fill up your car. If not fill it up, you can put a decent amount of gas in it. But the reality is you can't do both of these to a very high level. You can't have a nice meal and fill up your car for $20. You'll have to choose between these two options. And that's basically, you do that because, again, you have a limited resource and you have an unlimited want. The limited resource is $20. The unlimited want is wanting both lunch and gas for your car. And you can't have both. So therefore, that's what we do in economics. To give you another example, within the time. As I said, there's only 24 hours in a day. And the question is, what do you do with it? Okay. Some of you love to do this, as we all do to a certain degree, teenagers more than most, okay? But you also need to be able to do this, okay? So you need to make a choice. Are you going to study and prepare for your classes and your exams, or will you take an extended nap and have to deal with the consequences of that when the exams come due, okay? So the question is, how do we make these choices? How do you decide where to spend your time and how to spend your money? In economics, how you really decide is what we call is based on utility, on how much benefit you get from the consumption or using that good or service. How happy does it make you? How much satisfaction, as it says here. So, for example, in the morning, which of these two will give you more satisfaction? For many of us, a nice hot cup of coffee is a wonderful, if not necessary, way to start the day. Of course, on a hot summer afternoon, the cold glass of water here on the right is probably going to make you feel is much more inviting than a hot cup of coffee. Okay. So, again, how much satisfaction it can change. It's obviously it's different for different people, but that really helps determine how we use our limited resources. Okay. So, also in there is something called incentives, which is another economic term that you need to know. So basically, incentives is something that motivates you, and again, the key here is in a positive way to do something. So, to give you an example, which you can obviously relate to, is getting a high school diploma. Why are you motivated right now to get a high school diploma? Well, as many of you know, this will give you access to higher education. People who get a high school diploma make more money than those that don't. Okay, um, you are legally required to be in school until a certain age, and so therefore, um, there are many things. There are many incentives for getting a high school diploma. On the other hand, for a lot of people, going to work can also be a big incentive because obviously you get a paycheck, you get more of this limited resource, money, okay, which you're not going to get if you're sitting in a classroom. You're not going to get a paycheck right away. Um, so the question is which is a bigger incentive? Getting a high school diploma and getting all the potential um, opportunities that come with it, or is it go out and get a job and make money now? Okay, all the studies will show you, by the way, that getting the high school diploma will allow you to make much more money than not, um, and that is something that we will look at a little bit more. Okay. The last key point is something we call opportunity cost. Okay. What the opportunity cost is, the reality is that when you make a choice, which again, how you spend your money or your time, or what we produce with our limited resources, everything involves an opportunity cost. Okay? And as it says here, the opportunity cost is what you give up. Okay? So, for example, okay, if you stay up late studying for a final, which you might have done in the past or might do in the future, okay, the reality is you're going to be very tired the next day because you have not gotten enough sleep. Okay? You will be ready for the test and hopefully you'll do well, but what you gave up was a good night's sleep. Okay? So, to kind of give another example of opportunity cost, right now you're watching this video. Okay? You had a choice how to spend this 10 or 15 minutes. You could have gone outside, took the dog for a walk, took a nap, okay? Or you could watch this video. You chose to watch this video to learn these concepts, and you gave up the opportunity of walking the dog, taking a nap, or watching a show on TV. You could not do both. So anytime you make a choice, you are at some level, consciously or unconsciously, giving something up. Okay? When you go to class, you give up, the opportunity cost is not going out to lunch with your friends while they're going because you're sitting in class. Same kind of thing. So finally, we come to this idea in economics that this cartoon is highlighting, which is there's no such thing as a free lunch. Obviously, this cartoon is kind of a tongue-in-cheek, where the man has a free lunch, but it costs him $10, so obviously that is not free. But even if, say for example, you came into class and I were to invite you to go to lunch, now I would pay for it because I invited you to lunch. But if you come to lunch with me, there is a cost. There is an opportunity cost. If you go to lunch with me, you cannot go to lunch with your friends. And of course, yes, you will be sitting in public, sitting with the teachers on your free time. But again, you can't go home and take a nap. You can't go to work if you choose to come to lunch with me. So again, it just reiterates the point that no matter what you do, okay, there's something that you give up in order to do what you want to do. So if someone says, hey, do this and you get a free t-shirt, well, they still want something. They want some information of some kind. And there is nothing that is completely free. You always give up time or the opportunity to do something else. Or oftentimes, obviously, sometimes you give up money. So these are some of the basic concepts that we're going to use for the rest of the semester. Please feel free to watch the video again if necessary. And I will see you in class. Thank you very much.